one, just really summarizing quite a few topics that we've brought in together, called gut health and gut fat. And obviously they're interlinked in this idea of really getting your body healthy first, front loading your health. And obviously the byproduct of you being healthy and functioning at a high level is going to be able to drop that body fat. Okay, so if it is a bit stubborn, things aren't working like it used to, then diving in and getting awareness of some of these things is going to be really, really important. Okay, so if I can move that, yeah, cool. So the first one, I want to just get a really good base with gut health. Now, this is obviously something we've touched on a ton in the past. Hey, Mark, great to have you on. And there's a lot of things that go into this, right? I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but these 4 categories are certainly areas that we touch on and focus on the most, that you definitely want to pay attention to. Okay, so the first one are food intolerances. When I ask people on these coaching calls, I get an awareness of how are you feeling? Hey, Malcolm, great to have you on. I hope you booked that coaching call soon. Good to have you here. With the food intolerances is getting an awareness of, okay, what do you feel bloated, tired, gassy on, right? And I ask everybody that. And most people know that beer bloats them up. They notice that some crappy white bread makes an issue, but we want to know deeper down, where are those intolerances coming through? And I think a lot of the time, and this myself was a realization, is I had to know and distinguish the difference between full and inflamed. Hey, Carl, good to have you on. I hope you're booking a call this week too. Malcolm and Carl, that's your action step. You're both in the program, so I'll make sure we're talking to you soon. I haven't talked in a while. So the big distinguishment is between being full and being inflamed, all right? And that's really, really an issue, right? Where people are constantly having eggs for breakfast. And I'm not using, eggs aren't bad by all means, but when you have them every single breakfast for the last 3 years, you can build up an intolerance to that same protein coming through. So you've got to really get an awareness of what it is, because if there is something that's coming through as being, I'm feeling sluggish, I'm feeling bloated, and that's just normal, then we've really got to identify what those are, right? Because a lot of people get a really, really, very, very hard to make that distinction between the two, okay? So are you full or are you inflamed? If you ask yourself just that one question from today, I think you'll start to really bring identify some food groups coming through, right? But just getting that awareness of if you have a certain meal and you start to feel quite sluggish afterwards, or you start to notice your cognitive function at work starts to sway, and you start to sort of go off track, right? And I have a lot of people being like, Ollie, I get that after every meal, right? I feel tired, I feel sluggish after every meal. Well, there's obviously something there that's so broken down and letting all these toxins into the bloodstream that's causing this high toxic load, right? And it really, really has to start with rebuilding this back up. And a lot of the protocols that we bring in with our clients is, as you've probably seen with a couple of testimonials people have put up recently, is they see an increase in their energy in 2 weeks, right? The big thing that we keep our focus is over that first month, we really want to see how we can heal that gut so that long-term we can actually start introducing foods back in, like the eggs, for example, but we actually have to give itself time to not be bombarded with the same foods, right? So really going through and navigating that to understand what is something they're intolerant to, or simply just being over consuming that has been causing issues. Okay, now stress I've added in here, and as its own category, we know there's plenty of things here, but the reason I want to add it in with the gut health side of things is something that I personally went through as well, is this awareness of high stress will cause further intolerances. Okay, and a very, very simple example, whether that be either mental stress or physical, hey Wade, is getting an awareness of where that comes in. So what I mean is, for a lot of people, I noticed in the high training or gym training space, was the food they got intolerant to the most was usually the food they were having after their workout, right? So they're having it immediately after the workout. They were trying to stop that recovery. But the big thing that we work with a lot of our clients, and this is probably a little bit of side tangent, but we've really got to get an awareness of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic response we get throughout the day, right? So when it's high stress, we're in a sympathetic state. When we're calm and we're digesting and our immune system's working well and we're, things are recovering, then we're going to be in a parasympathetic state. So the goal really overall is how can we get our body into a parasympathetic state as much of the day as possible, apart from training, obviously, where that stimulus is being created, right? And this is a huge problem in itself, because everybody's wired and tired the whole day. They're always stressed. They never give their body time to digest, to relax, to recover. And that's obviously a huge one in itself. But if you are always in that high stress state, then what that causes is an issue with an association between that stress and the foods you're eating. Okay, really, really interesting topic, and this is something we can dive in a lot. Hey, Ash and Monty, good to have you on. So the awareness around the stress here is your body starts to create an association between that high stress state and the food, okay? Because it happens when you have those food intolerances that come through, your body causes a stress reaction, right? Which is higher inflammation. So whether it comes from the food itself or the high stress situation you're in, your body can tag that in the same way and be like, right, my body's not using this food all that well, and it's starting to really cause up excess and inflammation and starts to really break down this gut lining, right? Really, really interesting stuff. So whether that be post-training in that physical sense, or if it's always that lunch you have that you're inhaling at work because you have to get back to work, then that's something that you want to look at, right? And you'll start to, I've noticed this a lot with a lot of first responders, a lot of nurses, doctors, lawyers, whatever it might be, who are always in a really, really high stress state, and they never take that 10, 20 minutes to actually have their lunch, right? Because they are so high stress, they don't give the body time to calm down, get into that lower parasympathetic response to be able to digest food properly. Now, why is that obviously so important? It's getting this awareness of, if you're high stress, then this obviously increases cortisol. And what does that do? It actually increases your blood sugar, and it brings all of your blood, or 80% of your blood, to your muscles, right? And if you think of this from an evolutionary standpoint, we've gone through this a fair amount of times before, but getting an awareness that when we bring all the blood into the muscles, then it's that flight or fight response, right? So we're in the position to be physically active, to be able to get away or fight whatever danger is there, right? That's obviously not happening in today's society, but that's obviously the natural response that is ingrained into who we are. So if we're always in that state, then that means that that blood's going to come from somewhere, right? So it has to be pulled away from the organs. It has to be pulled away from the digestive tract and into the muscles, which makes anything that's sitting in your gut at the time, it just sits there, right? Your body's under a lot of stress. It doesn't work the way it should. And you have to really bring this back to, how can we lower the stress? And I know this is obviously, unfortunately, this is one of the hardest things to really focus on, is managing stress. But hopefully that gives you a bit of an awareness of why this is bringing up so many intolerances as well. Hey, Jason, good to have you on. So give me a comment below. Let me know if that makes sense. It's just getting this awareness of stress, whether it comes from the actual food intolerance itself, or whether your body tags that as something it's now becoming resistant to because you're always high stress. Either way, whatever one of those stresses causes, it's still going to jack up inflammation and really cause issues with the overall gut health. All right. So obviously the digestive stress really ties into this quite a bit. And as I mentioned, I intentionally use the word inhaled because when people are in a rush, when they're stressed, when they're eating, when they're at work, they tend to not take the time to chew. All right. So really trying to get an awareness of, how can we really slow down? How can we be mindful about what we eat, and really make sure that if we're simply chewing, that makes such a big difference on what's happening deeper down in the stomach, right? The only place you have teeth are in your mouth. And although that sounds kind of silly, it's getting this awareness that most people just take 2 chews and then swallow, and they never give our body time to break that food down. So by the time it gets to the gut, it's still like a half a steak, right? And your body's acidity has to really work very, very hard to try to break these foods down. So one very, very easy way that we talk about with our clients in week 1 is like, you need to be able to chew your food. And although that's just mind-bogglingly simple, it's one of the biggest things that even if you're eating well but you're inhaling your food, it makes a big, big difference on the digestive system as a whole. Okay, hey Matt. So I hope that makes sense too. Give me a comment if you're still with me there. And then the last one here is something that can get very, very intricate, and we can dive in a lot deeper, but around this bacterial imbalance, right? And when you get an awareness that we have more bacteria in our gut than cells in our body, we start to realize how important this really is. It's really going to navigate so many things that happen in our body at one time. So looking at things like your serotonin production, right? The happy neurotransmitter that's going to elevate our mood, that's massively impacted by the health of our gut. So if you feel low, that can really come from either a hormonal or a gut issue. Typically, gut is going to affect hormones. So really looking at how we can improve that bacterial balance. I don't want to go too deep on this one, but the big action step that we want to look into here, if you do believe there's a bacterial imbalance, if you're not already taking into account the food intolerances, start there. But the second one is always going to be sugar. All right. So looking at food in a very, very high sugar state, that's going to really start feeding the bad bacteria in your gut and not so much the good. Okay. So the big thing is we're never trying to just completely get rid of all the bad bacteria, but we need to make sure that, because it's kind of impossible, but we need to make sure that there's a balance between the two, right? If we start feeding the bad bacteria and we're not doing anything for the good, like our pre and probiotics, then what that's causing is an overgrowth in the gut, and that can cause a lot of issues being in that dysbiosis. Okay, so there's a lot of things we can dive into there that gets very, very deep, but the simple awareness of if you do feel like your gut is having issues, those food intolerances, being aware of what those are. If you aren't sure and you really don't know where to start, then please reach out, we can help you out. But the second one is obviously those simple refined sugars, right? So obviously everything gets broken down to glucose, but if we're having our food sources in like lollies and a lot of fructose and a lot of, which is fruit, high fruits, like that's where those apples and bananas and all these things, obviously as a health food, they're okay. But what we simplify this down into is fructose is really not used particularly well by the body unless you're already lean. So it's really just glorified sugar, right? You're getting a couple of micronutrients in there, which is great. But if your gut is not working well and your body fat's too high, your body's probably not going to be using that fructose all that well, okay? So things like your lollies, things like all these processed foods is an issue. But I do also think if you're overdoing the sugars, that has come through. We had one guy recently that was doing a ton of apples, and obviously there's this quote unquote healthy food, but because his body fat wasn't where it was and the gut, it was a little bit out of balance, this was just ruining things further and further. Okay, so that is quite an interesting one there as well. Hey Ash, I can't see to just slow down and eat the food. Yeah, Ash, exactly right. And like you've told me plenty of times before, right? You've been in the industry a ton of times. I know you know what good food is, but you can just sabotage yourself so early because you just decide to inhale that food rather than actually chewing. And one of the biggest things in a fitness space is people get so bored with their food that they start trying to back it down with water, right? Which if you start drinking a bunch of water and food at the same time, that can also cause issues with the acidity level in your stomach as well. So getting awareness there is quite useful, okay? Obviously, having a little bit of water with your meal is not an issue, but if you're having a litre of water and trying to catch up on your water intake for the day while you're eating, that can actually be a negative. Okay, so hope that one's really helpful. There's a lot there for sure. On this chart, there's all sorts of things that we could dive into, but the main thing on that side is these are all kind of examples, a lot of the main probiotics. And one thing I'll say about probiotics is it's certainly helpful for gut if that gut is already helpful, is already healthy. But if things are out of whack and there's some sort of dysbiosis, there's some sort of bacterial overgrowth, your probiotic should be something that's a no-no because it will actually grow the wrong bacteria. So although probiotics is for gut health, it certainly shouldn't be your first focus, okay? Cool. So all those questions, obviously, as we went through in the start of the week, it was great to see so many things that you wanted us to dive into and really getting awareness around this whole idea of, dropping body fat, increasing muscle mass, and increasing our metabolism. Now, there's a lot of things that come into that. And obviously, the biggest piece that we're going to keep coming back to is this gut health piece. But I want to break it down into quite a few things here today, which is all of these, right? So we've got 7 topics that we had here today. We've gone through all of these over the course of the week, so I'm not going to cover all of them, but these are the ones that you should certainly be paying attention to, right? So we've got that stress component. We've talked about that quite a bit already. We've got this metabolic flexibility element, which I think is hugely underutilized. I want to touch on that one today. Daily movement, right? So getting awareness of what that looks like out of just normal exercise. Light exposure we're going to dive into as well. And then we've got these bottom 3, which we've all done dedicated trainings on in the past, getting this awareness of toxicity, making sure we actually keep, at very minimum, maintain our muscle mass, if not increase it, to keep our metabolism high is a really, really key part there. And then obviously sleep is huge, right? If we're not getting at least 7 hours, it's going to make a big difference into this rejuvenation of cells, our recovery, our cognitive function, our overall digestive health, and everything in between, right? So sleep is huge. We've done a lot in those trainings before, okay? So the first one was this awareness around light exposure. And there's 3 main ones that I want to touch on today, was this awareness of blue light, awareness of natural light, and we've got red light. Right now, by natural light obviously means not light from the sun, and interestingly enough, that changes the exposure of how many blues, greens, reds we're getting in that sun throughout the day. So this is where the idea is, most of you may understand this idea of blue light being maybe detrimental to your sleep. It's becoming more and more popular as people are aware of these blue light filters on their phones and their computers and glasses even, that we're working a lot with our clients currently. But what I want to get actually clear of is actually blue light itself is not actually bad. It's more the time in the day that's the issue, right? So if we start to understand the circadian rhythm and getting awareness of where we are, blue light in the morning can actually be helpful for waking us up, provided it's natural and it's not looking at a bloody screen, because there's obviously psychological things we want to look at as to why we're looking at our phone first thing in the morning. But what I'm saying is blue light in the morning can actually help increase our energy and wake us up. But if we've got that same blue light in the afternoon and evening where we're trying to, watching TV or computer games or whatever, then that's going to suppress our melatonin production, is going to keep our brain awake, and we're not going to be able to get that good night's sleep, right? So an awareness of blue light not being just labeled as bad, but we have it in the day can be really, really important, okay? So when it comes to natural light, obviously the sun does this naturally, right? There's more blue light in the morning and then there's none in the afternoon, whereas there's no real red light in the morning and there's a lot more in the afternoon, okay? And this is really, really interesting when you start to get an awareness of why people get so burnt, right? And if you look at society in general, in the summer, they kind of drag their feet in the morning and then they're out in the sun around that midday or in the afternoon. And why that's such an issue is not because they haven't put sunscreen on, it's because they haven't taken that time to prime their body with those blue lights and with those, at a cellular level, get that body ready for those lights later in the day, right? So as a quick action step, if you don't want to get as burnt, you want to make sure you spend more time in the sun between 7 and say 9 and less time in the sun between 12 and say 3, 4, right? Everybody knows that midday is obviously stronger, but you'll actually be able to tolerate the sun much, much more if you spend more time in that morning sun to prime the body at a cellular level for that afternoon sun, right? Really, really important stuff. And no sunscreen company will tell you that. And then the last one here is red light, all right? Now, red light can actually have really, really big rejuvenating and performance benefits and can be really, really helpful. So you're seeing a lot of this red light therapy, a lot of infrared red light therapy, and at a cellular level, these things can be hugely restorative. That can be very, very helpful. But again, we're looking at we get more of those red lights in the afternoon. So if we were to do red lights in the house, or we've got the sort of, obviously you get more of a red tinge to your screens when you go a blue light filter, is it's making sure that we're getting lights that aren't stimulating the brain as much to stay awake. So having more of those red lights in the afternoon, having the blue light glasses, or even that red light therapy are all hugely important things as well. All right. Cool. And then the next one here was this awareness around daily movement. Okay, so there's main three areas I'll chuck this into today. Is this awareness of our actual exercise? What does that look like in regards to certain cardio, certain weights, certain whatever you're doing that is actually intentional exercise, whether that be a squash game, cycling, anything. Is something that you're really getting your body into a high elevated state. That's obviously really important, and we want to make sure that we're making sure at least 1 to 2 workouts a week of that is in a resistance-based state, so we can really increase both our muscle mass and metabolism and really get things firing, but also making sure that cardiovascular aspect is really, really important as well, whether it just be for mental health as well as getting some blood flow and making sure we are aerobically efficient at some point as well. There's lots of benefits around that. Obviously, exercise is helpful, but these other next two are the ones that maybe we don't pay attention to enough, that are really, really helpful at making sure our metabolism and things are really functioning and firing at a high level. Okay, so the walks here are going to be really, really helpful when we get an awareness of just from a breathing aspect. I really anchor this to breathing for our clients and making sure we get that deep diaphragmatic breathing, making sure we can really expand and contract the lungs, and make sure that as a daily practice of just getting the walks in, being one of the most natural movements on the body, obviously very dynamic in the way the legs are moving, can really help with balance and overall coordination and function of the brain during the day, because we're getting so many things working there as well. So although very simple, can be really, really helpful to your day. And then outside that is your daily activity, right? So this is something I noticed a lot when I went from working in a gym as a PT for many years to sitting down in more of a corporate space, or now obviously in this online coaching space, I'm sitting down a lot, right? So there's a big difference in those 8, 10, 12, whatever hours I do during the day, where I'm now sitting down rather than standing up the whole time, and realizing that did make a huge difference to my metabolism in general, right? And most people are aware that if you have a sedentary job, you are sitting down during the day, you have to find a way to make up for that outside of those daily activities, right? So whether that be you actually walking to work or cycling to work or getting into that lunchtime walk, or even just doing a couple movements like stretching and yoga and mobility or whatever is sort of helpful for you, that allows you to just get some blood flow, get some range in those joints that aren't moving to make sure you're getting things back up. Okay, really, really beneficial, really underutilized to get our body back on and really firing at a high level. Okay, and then the last one here is, do you enjoy it? Right? It's although it sounds silly, there's two ways I could actually go with it here. Is this awareness of, you need to make sure that you're not dragging yourself into the gym and dreading it every time, because you need to make sure there's something that you enjoy, because when you have a positive association with what you do, you'll do it more often. But the second part that you get to here, which I don't really need to go into today and probably contradicts my point, but getting that awareness that you don't need to feel like you're in love with it every time, right? You need to make it a daily activity and do it for the long-term focus of who you want to be, rather than just because you enjoy it or don't enjoy it in that time, right? And this is where people get into the rut of only training once a week because they're only training when they want to do it, right? So really start looking at this change in focus of, I've got this identity, I've got this vision of who I want to be, and to be that person, I must exercise this way, I must set myself up the right way, I need to just move, sweat, breathe, whatever it might be, and that is why I enjoy it. It's not necessarily the association of me in the moment sweating and having to put my shoes on to go out the door, but because when I get back, I show up as so much of a better person. That's the kind of identity shift that we need to have to make sure you can move forward. And this is, a conversation I have most weeks with our online clients, is making sure that what we build in practice is, one, they've got a positive association with it because they don't actually do it, but two, they know why they're doing it long term. So this is something that really becomes anchored as a habit and as easy as brushing your teeth. There is no other way about it doing it. If I only trained when I wanted to, I'd be fat. If Ash only trained when she wanted to be, she'd be fat, and she's certainly not. And most people on these calls that would be going through it and they're doing it consistently probably understand that aspect. So if you struggle with that, you struggle with motivation, get past that fairy tale of thinking you need to love it every time. We need to find a strong enough why and really anchor you to it. If that's still not enough, the accountability is always a massive boost there as well. Cool. So the last one I want to touch on today is just getting this awareness of metabolic flexibility. And this is the topic that was an absolute game changer for so many of our clients as we started to install this in the more advanced sections of our online coaching programs, because it's one of these aspects that 99% of the population do not have, right? They're metabolically inflexible. And what metabolic flexibility simply means is getting this awareness of our body being able to use more than one fuel source, right? So most people are 100% reliant on carbohydrate, right? And this is, interestingly enough, if you see someone who's got a really, really big gut and they've got absolutely no ass, it'd be weird if you're looking at that, but as a PT, I'm always looking at that, is because this gut now becomes like its own energy source, right? The body needs constant carbohydrate to keep it going. And what's the biggest muscle in your body? It's your glutes. So when you run out of that fuel source being carbohydrate because you haven't been grazing every hour, your body's like, well, fuck, I've got no carbohydrate left in my body. I don't know how to use fats properly. So I'm now going to chew away at muscle, right? Biggest muscle in your body is your glutes, right? So now you start breaking down your glutes, you start adding fat to your gut, and you start to have those back problems, you start to have posture problems, and this can really come into quite a big cycle. And again, I'm going left tangent today, I'm just enjoying the conversation, but getting an awareness of the shift in how can we get our body using fats as fuel, or have the ability to use both fats and carbs, right? Because if we just go fats as fuel, like a keto diet, then we run into the same issue. We become fat adapted, but we have no ability to use carbohydrates. So we just have the same issue, but on the other side of the spectrum, and now we don't enjoy carbs either. So the big shift is having the ability to have the flexibility to use both. We're not only using carbohydrate, not only using fat, we're being able to use both so that we don't force our body to use protein, because the last thing we want to be doing is breaking down protein, which would be decreasing our metabolism, decreasing our strength, decreasing our life expectancy, all sorts of things, right? So that ability to use both carbohydrate and fats as fuel is massive, all right? So looking at that and really looking at the timing of nutrients can be really, really helpful at diving deeper into that, okay? So if you are someone that has a certain breakfast, you think sort of healthy oats or cereal or whatever you're having in the morning, and you start to have these dips and dives during the day, then this is you, my friend. If you do not have that ability to have sustained energy for a long time, and you feel like you're constantly craving, or you're running out of energy, or your mood's all over the show, or your cognitive function's just shot, then this is something that we certainly need to dive into. And again, this is something that there's probably all sorts of caveats and all sorts of things that we need to dive into here, but the awareness of your ability to program your body to use fats as fuel can be really helpful. Okay, so something we use with our clients a lot that we are diving into to get an awareness of this is trying to make sure that we can use fats more in the morning. Okay, so I want you to try it for 2 weeks. You probably feel terrible for 3 if you're really metabolically inflexible, but 3 days, not 3 weeks, to get clear on how we can build this back up. A very easy way of doing that is adding more fats at the start of the day. All right, so how can we get in more of the healthy fats like avocados, your nuts, or olive oils, whatever it might be, to your morning breakfast, and remove the things like your cereals, like your oats. Although some of those might be a helpful food, putting them in the first part of the day programs your body to be reliant on carbohydrate to be used through the day. If we can make that shift and look at using those fats as fuel in the morning rather than just constant carbohydrate, this can make a big difference. Right now, this is a very big topic. The reason I'm sort of hesitating here is just getting awareness of how much can I give you without confusing you, but that as a gist of it is this ability to use both carbohydrate and fats as fuel. Okay, I hope that's really helpful. Now I don't usually offer this in the program. This is certainly sort of more of an exclusive offer for our people on our email list, but if you haven't seen it and you want access to this, we have a 4-week body reset program that really walks you through a lot of these nutritional components of improving your metabolic flexibility, of improving your gut health, and really just building a base. If you're not ready to set up a call with us, you don't want to dive into that full one-on-one, but you really want to understand some of those aspects there, then by all means, just send me a message directly or comment, "Yep," below, and I will send you a link through to have a little read through. It's a very small investment. It's $47 to get into that program, but it allows you to really go through those first 4 weeks, really walk you through some of the things we've talked about today. And hey, if that's helpful, I'd love to help you out there. I hope today's been really insightful. Hopefully it's been something that at least brings up some bigger questions. I think there's a lot of value in today if you can take that away and implement with it. There were so many questions this week. There were so many, really deep, intelligent questions asked that I wanted to make sure that I gave you some solid answers that helped you move forward. So I hope you've had an incredible week, guys. It's been an awesome one for me so week, and it's just been, each week we continue to grow, continue to impact so many people. I'm always amazed with how many emails and messages and all things I get, which just makes it all more and more worth it. So I hope you have an incredible night, and we will talk again very soon. See ya.